At 24 years old, you believed that working hard was enough. Every morning, your alarm rang at 5:30 a.m. You lived in a tiny rented room above a convenience store. The walls were thin. The ceiling leaked when it rained. Your monthly salary was just enough to pay for rent, food, transportation, and a few bills. Every payday followed the same routine. Salary comes in, bills go out, balance, almost zero. You weren't lazy. You worked 6 days a week. You rarely bought new clothes. You skipped vacations. You didn't waste money. And yet, somehow, you always felt broke. One Tuesday afternoon, while riding the bus home from work, your phone suddenly went black. You pressed the power button. Nothing. You tried charging it. Nothing. You visited a repair shop. The technician looked at you and said, "The repair will cost around $300. You froze. $300. To many people, that wasn't a lot of money. But to you, it was everything. You opened your banking app. After paying rent next week, you'd have only $280 left. You sat outside the repair shop for nearly an hour. For the first time in your life, you realized something terrifying. You weren't one emergency away from becoming rich. You were one emergency away from becoming homeless. That night, you couldn't sleep. You stared at the ceiling and asked yourself a question that changed your life. What if working harder isn't the answer? The next day, during your lunch break, you started watching videos about money. You learned something nobody had ever taught you in school. Poor people work for money. Wealthy people build systems that make money work for them. At first, you didn't believe it. How could someone earn money while sleeping? How could investments grow without constant work? How could ordinary people become financially free? But curiosity turned into obsession. Every night after work, you studied. Budgeting, investing, business, side hustles, financial psychology. You stopped scrolling social media. You stopped playing video games for hours. You stopped complaining. Instead, you started learning. The first thing you changed was your spending. You wrote down every single expense, every coffee, every snack, every unnecessary purchase. The truth shocked you. You weren't spending thousands on luxury. You were losing hundreds through small habits you never noticed. So you created your first budget. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't exciting. But for the first time, you knew exactly where your money was going. Then you started saving. At first, only $20 a week. It felt ridiculous. How could $20 change anyone's life? But you learned something powerful. The amount mattered less than the habit. After 3 months, you had saved your first emergency fund. It wasn't much, but it was the first time in your life you felt slightly safe. Then you started your first side hustle. You offered simple online services after work. The first month, you earned only $50. The second month, $120. The third month, $300. It wasn't life-changing money, but it changed something more important: your belief. For the first time, you realized you weren't trapped. Your income wasn't fixed. You could create more. Over the next 2 years, you worked harder than ever. Not just at your job, on yourself. You woke up early. You learned new skills. You read books. You built relationships. You invested every extra dollar you earned. While your friends upgraded their phones, you upgraded your knowledge. While others spent weekends partying, you spent weekends building. People laughed at you. Why are you working so much? You only live once. Enjoy your money? You smiled, because you understood something they didn't. Temporary sacrifice creates permanent freedom. By age 27, your side business earned more than your full-time job. The decision terrified you. Should you quit? What if you failed? What if you lost everything? But you remembered sitting outside that repair shop years ago. You remembered choosing between fixing a phone and paying rent. You never wanted to feel that helpless again, so you took the risk. You quit. The first 6 months were brutal. Some days you made money. Some days you made nothing. You doubted yourself constantly, but you kept going. Slowly, things changed. Your business grew. Your investments grew. Your confidence grew. At age 30, you reached your first major milestone. You had enough savings and investments to cover 1 full year of living expenses. For most people, that number meant nothing. For you, it meant freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from desperation. Freedom from living paycheck to paycheck. But you didn't stop. You continued investing. You continued learning. You continued building. Years passed. Then one morning, at age 38, you woke up and looked at your financial statement. You stared at the number for several minutes. Your assets had officially crossed $1 million. You expected to feel different. You expected fireworks, excitement, celebration. Instead, you felt something much simpler: peace. You walked outside and bought yourself a cup of coffee. You sat quietly and thought about the young person sitting outside the repair shop years earlier. The person who believed they were poor because they didn't work hard enough. The person who thought money problems would disappear if they just tried harder. You finally understood the truth. The difference between a $20,000 life and a $1 million life isn't luck. It isn't intelligence. It isn't even income. It's the decisions you make repeatedly over time. The habits you build, the skills you learn, the risks you take, the sacrifices you're willing to make today for a better tomorrow. Your life didn't change overnight. It changed one decision at a time. One book, one budget, one investment, one opportunity, one day. And maybe that's the lesson most people never learn. Financial freedom isn't built through one big moment. It's built through thousands of small moments that nobody sees. So if you're struggling right now, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you're wondering whether things will ever change, remember this: you didn't start with money, you started with a decision. And sometimes one decision can change the entire direction of your life.